All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the third installment of our webinar series, the Indian Energy Minerals Forum. This topic today is on resources and technology available to tribal energy development. This is co-hosted with Sagebrush Hill Group LLC, Eric Watchman and Steve Gray, and moderated along with our own Mike Moore. And we have a special introduction by USEA's Acting Executive Director, Mrs. Sheila Hollis. So for those who don't know me, I'm Michelle Littlefield. I'm a program coordinator with the United States Energy Association's Consensus Program. Just a note about us, we're formally named Building Consensus on Carbon Capture, Utilization, and Storage, and Clean Coal Technologies. We call this program Consensus for short. This is a cooperative agreement with the Department of Energy, Fossil Energy. This program educates the public, policymakers, industry, and stakeholders on CCUS and CCT by hosting webinars along with a series of monthly educational briefings, conference workshops, technical reports, and we release monthly news clips of CCUS and clean coal related updates. If you would like to join our mailing list, if you have not done so already, feel free to send an email to the address at the bottom of your screen, and we'll add you as a subscriber to our Consensus mailing list. At the end of the session, we'll have a question and answer portion. Please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to submit questions, and we'll address as many as we can. This webinar will also be recorded and posted onto our event page along with the presentation slides, but we appreciate you taking the time to join us live. So with that, I'll pass it on to our Acting Executive Director, Ms. Sheila Hollis.
Thanks so much, Michelle, and welcome everyone. I'm delighted to be here on behalf of the United States Energy Association. What we do is to convene, provide a platform and a forum for the dialogue and sharing of ideas, solutions, problems, and vision in the energy arena. Not for profit, no lobbying, no advocacy, except for education and wisdom, and a forum on the issues associated with energy and all that goes with it today. We work all over the world hand in hand with USAID, the Department of Energy, and the Department of State. And to date, we have worked in 104 countries throughout the world, and our goal is to eliminate severe energy poverty, to assist countries that need assistance and invited and wanted, working with USAID to improve their energy systems, make them more stable, safer, more environmentally conscious, and the ability to work together in those many parts of the world, of course, has been challenging because of the inability to travel, but that's coming back online very quickly. So we're delighted and honored to play a part in this major domestic effort that we are thrilled to be a part of and to add support and assistance to in any way that we can. I know that Michelle and Michael Moore have put their heart and soul into this for many years as well. So I'm started out as an energy lawyer, but I've evolved into this role in USEA as a result of the very untimely and shocking passing away of the executive director who was in that position for 30 years, very suddenly late last summer. Roy Worthington, and I know this project was near and dear to his heart too. So with that, I turn it back to you, to Michelle and Michael, and take it from here.
All right. Well, Michelle, Sheila, thank you very much for taking time out of your day today to be part of this with us here. Thank you, Michelle, as well. I'm a program director and work real close with Steve and Derek with their initiative here with these series of webinars. I won't spend a lot of time carrying on here. I'm going to actually go right and turn it over to Steve and Derek to get it going, and then I'll be around if you need me to jump in the middle of anything. And great lineup, and appreciate who's on deck today. And with that, Derek, it is yours.
Thank you, Mike, and good morning. Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Sheila. I like your squash blossom, by the way, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I've got, there's more where that came from.
There you go. Okay. We're in good company. Good morning, Yat A. Bene, Shay, Derek Watchman, and I am president of Sagebrush Hill Group LLC, and I have a Navajo-owned company here on Navajo. And Steve Gray and I are delighted, and we want to say thank you to the United States Energy Association and the Department of Energy, their Office of Fossil Energy, for allowing us to hold what we're calling our Indian Energy Minerals Forum. And so Steve Gray and I have been working on this for a couple of years, and we're delighted to host a second round of webinars. And so in this series of webinars, excuse me, our basic function is with the recent agenda of carbon reduction and clean energy, we want to increase and provide conversation for those tribes that are dependent, looking at, or trying to transition away from carbon-based economies. And so we think it's important to raise the discussion. Many tribes here in the United States use to fund their government, they use coal, oil, natural gas, and basically a lot of fossil-based energy products. And so, of course, we're obviously cultural and environmentally minded, but we want to raise the agenda today. And so today we have a great lineup. But before I do that, I want to just introduce myself in Navajo, Shay Derek Watchman. It's Ice Gidney and Shle, Tohana Bashashim, Tutnazani, Deshiche Auto, Tabaha Chanela. And I'm originally from a town called Navajo, New Mexico. And before I introduce our guests, I'd like to turn the time over to Steve Gray, my partner in this project. So Steve, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Derek. And welcome everyone. We're as Derek mentioned, we're very pleased to have a good lineup today and to continue our discussion of Indian energy and the transition that everybody is being impacted by. So we are looking forward today to hearing some people's views and getting input from various individuals about just what is occurring out there in the energy world. As we've mentioned before, there's a great opportunity for Indian country, and especially for those tribes that are energy tribes. So we think as we bring more information to you, that you are able now to be able to take that back to your communities, to the tribes, and you're able to then see if those opportunities can work within your communities. Our whole focus is, making sure that we can create economic development opportunities across Indian land, but also to create jobs, good paying jobs. And so again, we welcome everyone today to joining us, and we look forward to hearing from each and every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. This is our third webinar, as Michelle mentioned, and today's topic is resources and technology available to tribal energy development. And so in looking at this particular series, we decided to focus on rare earth and rare minerals, and also to look at what's happening in New Mexico through the recent New Mexico Energy Transition Act. And so to speak to rare earth and rare minerals, so we invited Dr. Navid, excuse my pronunciation, Navid Matabe and Virginia McLemore from the New Mexico Tech University here in New Mexico. And so Navid is a professor and the department chair for mineral engineering, and Dr. McLemore is the senior economic geologist, and she does mineral outreach. And so, and then also we have as our second guest speaker, Jason Sandell, and he is the executive vice president for his company, Aztec Wealth Family of Companies, but also he's the convener in the state of New Mexico for the New Mexico Energy Transition Act. And so without further ado, I'd like to turn the time over to Navid and Jenny, who will talk to us about their project related to rare earth and rare minerals in New Mexico. And it looks like we have a PowerPoint presentation. So I'll turn time over to you. And so thank you. The floor is yours.
Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. What I'm going to talk about is some of the projects that we've worked on rare earth minerals, and then how that has led into looking at rare earth in coal. Can I have the next slide, please? So first, just so that we're all on the same page, I find a lot of times misconceptions happen because people don't understand definitions. And so under the presidential executive order, he defined critical minerals, and actually that definition comes from a joint effort by the U.S. Geological Survey, the Department of Energy, and the Department of Defense. And so a critical mineral is defined as a mineral that is mostly non-fuel, although uranium is considered a critical mineral. And these minerals are essential to the economic and national security of the United States. And if these minerals were to be threatened as far as the supply chain goes, then this could really have dramatic impacts not only on our economy and the manufacturing and chemical industries, but also on our defense. And so these minerals are essential functions in manufacturing of a product. And without them, we could be in really dire circumstances. Some people ask why certain elements, why uranium is on here. Well, uranium's on this list because our Navy protects the seas from pirates and other things. And most of our US Navy is run off of nuclear power. So therefore, it is a matter of national security and national defense that we have in this. And I know that is a hot button, but that is the reality. And then why isn't copper on this list? Well, copper's not on this list because we do mine copper in this country, but then also copper is not a threatened supply chain at this moment. So could I have the next slide, please? One of the things that a lot of these critical minerals go into, and especially the rare earths, they go into computer chips. And in this chart, it's a periodic table, what I've attempted to do is show that elements in the 1980s that are shown here in green, these were used for computer chips, about a dozen of them. Well, today, a number of decades later, we're now looking at almost all of the periodic table being used in computer chips. And all these elements have to be mined. Yes, we can recycle some of them, but they do have to be mined. And I'm going to focus mostly on the rare earth elements, and that is lanthanum, which is La, and then that bottom tier of yellow that you see from cerium to lutetium. And yeah, I'm making you go back to high school to try to understand some of this, but that is the bottom line. These rare earth elements are specific elements that are very crucial to computer chips, but they also go into our magnets, our batteries, and all of our electronic devices. So they are very, very essential to our way of life today. Can I have the next slide? Now, there are other critical minerals, and what I've shown in this particular graph of the periodic table is I've shown all of the critical elements as defined by the Department of Energy, the USGS, and the Department of Defense. But what I've done here is I've color-coded the elements that are in red are currently being produced in New Mexico, including helium and potash. And potash is mined down in the Carlsbad area, and potash is critical to fertilizer. You can't grow anything without potash and the other fertilizer elements. The elements in blue were once produced from New Mexico, and very likely we could produce these elements in the future. And you see that the rare earth elements, the lanthanum through cerium and lutetium, these are elements that we once did produce from the state, and certainly we are looking at a number of projects in the state where future development is possible. The elements in green are elements we find in New Mexico, but we don't know what their resource potential is. And then the elements in yellow, pretty much, we do not have the geological environments to have these types of deposits. Note that in the future, these critical elements will probably change. And I also would like to note that coal contains several of these critical elements, and I'll come back to coal towards the end of my presentation. The next slide, please. So here's where we find rare earth elements in New Mexico. And you'll see up in the northwestern part of New Mexico, where a lot of the Indian tribal lands are, we see a lot of green diamonds. These are beach placer sandstone deposits. They're Cretaceous age, but they're also known as mineral sands. Also, I will talk about a project on the Pajarito project on the Mescalero Reservation down in the south central part of New Mexico. Next slide, please. Let's first start with beach placer sandstone deposits. These deposits are accumulations of heavy minerals. These minerals are formed in beach environments in Cretaceous times, 75 to 100 million years ago. They are mined, these types of deposits are mined today. They're more modern deposits, but they're known as mineral sands. Next slide, please. You can see these deposits here these are in Virginia, and you can see these black bands. These are the mineral sands. They're essentially formed by mechanical concentration, gravity, the action of waves, currents, and wind. And we get a variety of heavy minerals in these: rutile, titanite, ilmenite, zircon. Keep going, you can see it here on the slide. And these elements, some of them are critical minerals, some of them are minerals that we use in a variety of uses, but these are important minerals that do come from these types of deposits. Next slide. Now I focused on the rare earth elements, and they are not mined currently for rare earths, with the exception that Energy Fuels has recently gotten a grant from the Department of Defense to look at extracting rare earth elements from monazite from some of these mineral sands that are mined in North and South Carolina. This here is a picture of one of the mineral sands in Virginia that was operating a few years ago, and it was mined for titanium and zirconium. Next slide, please. The economics of these mineral sands, to give you an idea of what we're looking at if we were to mine Cretaceous mineral sands in New Mexico, is you're looking at about 10 million tons of greater than 2% of heavy minerals. And you're looking at zirconium, which the mineral is zircon. Zirconium goes into ceramic tiles. It goes into bricks to line steel making furnaces. It's an alloying agent in steel and goes into laboratory crucibles, just to name a few. Titanium is another one, and it's found in ilmenite, rutile, and leucoxene. And the titanium minerals, titanium goes into alloys in aircraft. You can't have aircraft without titanium. It's also used in white pigment that's found in toothpaste, paint, paper, glazes, plastics, some other uses, heat exchangers and desalinization plants, and welding rods. Yes, every morning you use toothpaste and it has titanium in it. It is the whitener. And rare earth elements is the potential. It is in the mineral called monazite. And the rare earth elements, as I mentioned before, goes to catalysts. It goes into glass making. It's used in polishing. But the most important uses are in batteries and magnets. All of your electronics, your cell phones, your laptops, all of these have rare earth elements in it. Wind turbines, solar farms require rare earth elements. And then you'll find some other minerals that are found in these mineral sands that also could be produced and help in the economics of the deposit. Next slide, please. New Mexico is blessed with a number of beach plaster sands, but they are Cretaceous of age. And they are found in a variety of deposits that are associated with some of the coal deposits. They're generally above or below the coal deposits. They actually form along the beaches, whereas the coal deposits form in the behind the beaches, in the lagoons and all that lead up to the beaches. And I'm going to talk just very quickly about two deposits in the state. Next slide, please. The Sanasti deposit is on the Navajo lands, and it is probably one of the largest of the beach plaster sandstone deposits in New Mexico. It's estimated that there's 4 million tons of ore that has titanium, zirconium, but it also does have rare earth elements. This deposit has not been drilled. It's not really, I've only mapped it roughly, so it really does need an evaluation. And to give you an idea of the evaluation we're looking at, the Apache tribe decided to actually take a look at what they had on their reservation. Next slide, please. So on the Jicarilla Apache Reservation up in northern New Mexico, it's kind of remote. There are beach plaster sandstones found there. Next slide, please. And the tribe decided to utilize a grant from Congress, and they decided to actually drill. And so we we got that contract, and we first went in and mapped the area. And then we got this really nifty drill rig. They use this drill rig in the copper industry, but what it is, it operates on by remote, by robots essentially. You can see the fella in green there walking beside the rig, and he's actually controlling the movement of this. There's no one on the drill rig, and he's controlling it by robotics. But the most important thing is that it takes a very small footprint in order to drill. Now, we had rather shallow drilling, but you can actually drill several hundred feet even deeper with this small footprint. So we have a very low disturbance of the ground. Next slide, please. So here you can see more of the operation of the rig. It just requires about 3 or 4 men. The pipe, it operates pretty much just like another drill rig, but I just want to emphasize that we had to disturb very little land. Next slide, please. This is the deposit shown here in pink. The red squares are the actual drill holes. So we drilled this deposit and we determined what the reserves were. Could I have the next slide? We did geochemistry on them. This is the geochemistry. We basically take the chemical analyses of the rare earth elements and we ratio them to a chondrite just so that we can get an interpretable patterns. And the patterns shown here in red are from the Apache Mesa on the Jicarilla Reservation. The other side are a variety of surface samples that I've collected from other beach plaster sandstones throughout the San Juan Basin. Some of these are on Navajo lands. All of these deposits do need evaluation. Next slide, please. These, the rare earth contents are economic. However, there isn't a lot of tonnage there. This particular deposit on the reservation was 132 short tons of ore with 3% titanium, a little bit of chromium, a little bit of niobium, and only 500 parts per million trace rare earth elements. However, if I could have the next slide, please. I feel that if a number of these deposits were mined throughout the San Juan Basin, then this deposit could in the future possibly be mined. Another deposit that I want to talk about is the Mescalero Reservation on the Mescalero tribal lands down in Otero County near Ruidoso. Now, this is a Proterozoic syenite alkaline rock complex. We've known about it since the 1950s. However, we really have not had a whole lot of mapping or a whole lot of work done it. The Mescalero tribe agreed with the Office of Bureau of Indian Affairs to actually take a look and do some drilling. And a student up at Colorado School of Mines did a thesis on this. Can I have the next slide, please? And indeed, he did some detailed work on the drill core from these 4 or 5 holes. This is the geologic map from Kelly back in the 50s. These are the geochemical analyses. Once again, it is rare earth elements normalized to chondrite. And once again, they do have the grades that are within economic criteria. Next slide, please. And the minerals in the Pajarito Mountain Proterozoic complex are eudialyte. This is the mineral that contains the rare earths. There's also 2 rare earth bearing silicates. There's a little bit, there's some fluorite, apatite, and zircon. And all of these minerals do have some rare earths associated with them. There is a little bit of thorium associated with this deposit, but not too much uranium. An actual reserve, next slide please, was not calculated by the thesis, but in 1990, Molycorp did some exploration and they estimated that there was over 2 million short tons of ore that had some yttrium, which is one of the rare earth elements, and zirconium. And once again, it's in the mineral eudialyte. Later on, the U.S. Bureau of Mines calculated about 500,000 short tons of nearly 3% total rare earth elements from this deposit. All of this has to be reevaluated in today's way we do resources and reserves. Next slide, please. Here I've shown a grade tonnage graph On the y-axis is the total rare earth in weight percent, and on the x-axis is the size in million metric tons. And you can see that Pajarito Mountain plots very well, nicely within a lot of these alkaline igneous rocks. To give you an idea of deposits that are currently in production, you can see Mountain Pass and Bayan Obo, China. These are the blue diamonds in the northeast quadrant of this graph. So these deposits could be economic. It's a matter of really defining if there are enough reserves, and if the tribes decide they want to develop this resource at this time. They may decide to hang on to this resource and develop it in the future. It is certainly up to what the tribes want to do, but having an understanding of the resource is important to make these kinds of decisions. Next slide, please. So New Mexico Tech applied for and has received a grant by the Department of Energy to look at rare earth elements and critical minerals in coal deposits. And this is a map showing the coal fields, mostly up in the northwest part of New Mexico, also in the Raton Basin, in the northeast part of the state. If I could have the next slide. And here I've just blown that graph up so that you can get an idea of the coal deposits. The coals do lie on Navajo and other tribal lands. And the coal not only has potential for rare earth elements, but there's also a possibility for cobalt, gallium, germanium, and other critical minerals. We just don't know. We have to actually get out there and do some sampling and do chemical analyses. And we also are going to be looking at the generating plants, the waste that they have stored on their plants, as well as looking at the mines themselves, at the waste that are left over from the actual mining of the coal. So not only are we looking at the coal itself, but we're also looking at the byproducts and the wastes and seeing what these elements are in what concentrations. Next slide, please. There are other critical minerals that we have potential for in the San Juan Basin on tribal lands, specifically helium and perhaps lithium. There's also potential for graphite on the Raton Basin. And could I have the next slide, please? And here's a map showing the helium potential. And you can see that the helium potential is almost entirely on tribal lands. But once again, these resources need to be looked at and evaluated to see if there's enough to economically mine today. And if they're not, it does provide a resource for the future. We can't mine everything today. We do need to save some of this for the future. Next slide. So as I said, another potential source are looking at the mine waste, even the uranium mine waste. Some of the uranium ores have been known to have up to 500 parts per million uranium in rare earth elements in them. And so it is possible to go back to some of these mines, a lot of them are abandoned mines, and actually look at the various wastes, including the acid mine drainage, and see what critical minerals, including rare earth elements that are in these wastes, could they be recovered, and could that actually help pay for the cleanup costs of these older mines? The graph, the figure that I show here on the right is actually a figure from an electron microscope, which is a very powerful microscope that we have here on campus. And you can actually see the bright white rare earth element overgrowth on zircon. So we can actually use this instrument and get down and really take a good look at where in the mineral structure the rare earth and other critical minerals are found. And that will help in understanding how we can go and recover them. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, I just want you to kind of to leave you with is that we really do need to evaluate critical minerals and rare earth elements in the state, including on Indian lands. And this is very important to understand. We may not mine these deposits now, they may not be economic now, but they do provide a future resource. And it's important to understand these resources in order to make appropriate land use decisions. As the economics for some of these elements increases because of increased demand and short supply, the dollar value per ton of ore may rise, which will certainly enhance deposit economics. These elements are going to be required far, far into the future, especially as we transition from fossil fuels into the new, more green technologies. The solar and wind farms require far more rare earth elements, and these have to be mined somewhere. Ultimately, the economic potential will depend upon production of more than one commodity in the area and more than one deposit in the San Juan Basin and elsewhere, and this definitely includes the Indian lands as well. So thank you. I'll be willing to take any questions when it's time for questions. And that is all that I really have at this point. So thank you for the opportunity to talk.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. McLemore. We appreciate that. Great study, and we look forward to more results on your work. And so now let's turn the time over to Dr. Mataba to talk about some of the economics and kind of add to the whole, new economy potentially with rare earth and rare minerals. And so I know we spoke yesterday about, the economics and the future. And so maybe you can add to that, Dr. Matabe, and we'd like to hear from you. So the floor is yours, sir. I think you're on mute.
You're on mute, Naveed.
My mic was sorry. Okay, I know you can't read my lips. All right. Yes, what I was saying is that Dr. McLemore covered majority of the important points here. And I can give you a little bit more about this particular project that we are doing. And when we were doing the proposal, we weren't able to bring in the representatives of the Navajo Nation and Indian nations into participating in this. And we are hoping to get the Indian nations more involved when we are doing the field work. And Dr. McLemore has managed to recruit a student, a Navajo student, to be working on this project. And we are hoping maybe we can get more young Navajo future students involved with this and have directly working with the, since most of the work is going to be on Navajo nations and the Indian land, then we would like to have more close participation of the tribes. As far as the economics go, again, Dr. McLemore covered that very well. But if you look at the presence of these rare earth elements and critical minerals, some of the numbers you saw, they're not very large concentrations. These are, of course, found everywhere. But let's say we see traces of these in coal seams, and those most likely will not be economical if we go mine the coal just to extract the critical minerals and rare earth elements, because the cost of mining associated with that has to be covered elsewhere. So we have to look at ways to, if we want to extract the coal, these critical minerals and rare earth elements from coal seams, we still need to use the coal. So the other area that needs attention, in my opinion, is what are we going to do with coal? Are we just gonna mine it and dump it somewhere else or burn it? So study research in clean coal technology is very important. One of our partners in this project, and again, it's Mineral Engineering Department, New Mexico Bureau of Geology, and PWRC, Petroleum Research and Recovery Center, who would be working on this project, as well as the two national labs, Sandia and Los Alamos. But PWRC is also working on projects supported by DOE in carbon capture side. So if advancements are achieved in that area, we can still use coal as a valuable and environmentally friendly source of energy. And when we get that, then it is economical to target the other minerals that are found as a residue after the coal is burned. And part of the study we are going to do is to sample waste from coal ash, and we expect to have higher concentrations of these rare earth elements. And again, the economics is all about cost, it's all about demand, it's all about price. Once these minerals are harder and harder to find, and the geopolitics involved with this, where the main source of these elements are coming from China. I thought Dr. McLemore would have talked about that. She always mentions that, and relying on China is not politically safe. But if the shortages are high and the prices go up, then we can go after these low-grade, low concentration deposits. So I'm just trying to think what else I can add that Dr. McLemore didn't mention. But it's all, the other challenges that we will have if we want to go after these deposits is the social and environmental impacts. Of course, we can talk about the economic impacts on these communities, because if these processing facilities, operations, of course, they will require a large labor force, and that would have a positive economic impact on the region. But at the same time, there is always the challenges we have with the other impacts, particularly environmental sustainability. We would expect quite a few or sources of opposition to expanding these mining operations and starting a new mining. And this is something that has to be taken into consideration. Yes, we think there are valuable resources in some of these locations, but can we get the permit to go in and even do exploration? And as part of our studies, we're not even proposing to go out in the field and do drilling. We're just going to do simple sampling. The reason for that is getting permit to do drilling. That would take a long time. So we're not even considering that. We would have liked to be able to do drilling, but we're not going to be able to do it. And that would limit our ability to better define these deposits in these basins here. So these are some of the challenges that we do have in the industry, and some of the things that Dr. McLemore mentioned is the importance of these rare earth elements, these critical minerals in our daily life. In future, we want to go with green sources of energy, then we're going to have to dig a lot of holes. Big holes to be able to extract these minerals economically. So the focus should be on how we're going to do it economically, safely, and environmentally acceptable to the public. So basically, I'm just focusing on the challenges that we do have in, we can't just say, yeah, it's there, so we just got to go mine it. It takes a lot of effort to be able to get there.
Well, thank you, Dr. Matabe, and thank you, Dr. McLemore, for a great presentation. Certainly, there's a lot of questions, that I'm sure tribes will consider. I know that there's several tribes with significant mineral, including coal deposits, and so potential opportunities there. But like Steve was mentioning, the big emphasis for moving into a carbon reduction environment is how do you continue to provide jobs, and at the end of the day, tribes basically mine these resources to provide revenue for their operations. And so, that's a big component that we're looking at. So, but we'll take questions at the end. But thank you very much, and we thank the New Mexico Tech for all the work that you're doing. So now let's move the agenda over to Jason Sandell. Sorry, Mr. Sandell, and actually, Jason and I go way back. Our fathers were both a part of the New Mexico legislature. My father was the late Leo Watchman Sr., and was a New Mexico representative from McKinley and San Juan County for almost 30 plus years. And I think you worked with, your father, Jason. And so, but welcome, Jason. And we'd like to hear a lot that's going on with the New Mexico Energy Transition Act. It's kind of an interesting concept, but what we like about it is that it has a tribal component. And I know that you're right now in the middle of the process, and I'm looking forward, to some positive outcomes. And it's actually related to, and I'm sure you speak to it, it's related to the closure of the coal mines actually in San Juan County and the power plants. And so, but welcome, Jason, and I'll turn the time over to you. Thank you for joining us.
Well, good morning, Derek, and good morning, Steve, and the rest of the panel. It's an honor to be with you all and with USEA this morning and with all of your guests. I very much appreciate the invitation to be able to speak today. I do have a presentation that I'm going to try and share on my screen and bring that up. Please let me know if it's something that you can see.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, terrific. So the New Mexico Energy Transition Act was a law that was passed in 2018 by the New Mexico legislature. It was carried by Senator Jacob Candelaria out of Albuquerque, and the purpose of the New Mexico Energy Transition Act here I'm gonna, I've got to pause for just a minute. I apologize. For some reason, my slides are not proceeding. There. Can you all still see that slide?
No.
No. In the time that it's going to fail, of course. I apologize. Okay, it says that I'm screen sharing. I'm going to stop the screen share and then bring it back up again. Sometimes I think, Derek, you said you need to do your hard reset. Share screen. There we go. Is that better?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
Jason, better.
I apologize for that inconvenience. Okay, so the New Mexico Energy Transition Act, as I said, was passed in 2018. And the purpose of the Energy Transition Act was to develop a renewable portfolio standard for electricity production inside of the state of New Mexico. That renewable portfolio standard was set at 50% of carbon-free electricity generation by 2030, and then 100% carbon-free electricity generation by 2050. The law also had a very important point, which you brought up, Derek, at my introduction, and I thank you for that, was that it provided a method for San Juan Generation Station, which is primarily owned by the Public Service Company of New Mexico, to sell securitization bonds in order for the plant, the coal-fired power plant, to close. And I believe that the amount that's available for securitization bonds for San Juan Generation Station to be $360 million. And so what the law is allowing is for funding to be put into place in the closure of that power generation facility. And in exchange for that, it was necessary for the legislature to identify that replacement power needed to be placed into the affected area. And that replacement power has now been determined to be solar, which will be placed out near Kirtland to replace the amount of power that was being generated through San Juan Generation Station. The other the other compromise that came about through the passage of the Energy Transition Act was that there was $20 million that was earmarked for assistance funds for specific purposes in the affected area. And so the affected area was identified as within 100 miles of San Juan Generation Station. And so the idea behind the Energy Transition Act and the securitization for the generation station itself was that there would be a renewed investment inside of the affected area in New Mexico. And that was clearly identified inside of the law as $12 million being appropriated to the Department of Workforce Solutions with the idea of retraining workers, $2 million to the Indian Affairs Department, and then $6 million to the Economic Development Department. In the law, each department that was allocated funds, so the Department of Workforce Solutions, the Indian Affairs Department, and the Economic Development Department, each of those departments were supposed to come together and create community advisory committees such that feedback was taken from a broad swath of folks that lived in the affected area, but were also affected workers. And so each one of those departments selected what was called a convener. And I'm lucky enough to be a convener that was appointed by the Department of Workforce Solutions. And the three conveners came together, one representing the Workforce Solutions, one Indian Affairs, and one for Economic Development Department. And we came together with the cabinet secretaries for each of those respective departments and decided to work collaboratively to build a unified community advisory committee. So instead of having three different committees, we worked together to create one larger committee under the auspices that we would be somewhat modeled after a base closure commission, where we would be taking broad-based feedback and pooling as much of the money that was available as possible, such that we could leverage those funds for other investments that could be put into northwestern New Mexico as we looked at transitioning from coal-fired power generation. The governor and the legislature clearly recognized and prioritized the unique economic landscape of Northwest New Mexico as they looked to pass this law. They focused on the impact on the tax impact to the local school district, which is why replacement power needed to be placed in the same county and the same community as the coal-fired generation was being pulled out of. They had also noticed that natural gas commodity pricing had remained on a decline since 2008, and the area is truly economically ravaged. And so it was important to ensure that there was investment that was placed back into northwestern New Mexico. And I think most importantly, it also, the legislation formally recognized the intergovernmental relationships with the Navajo Nation and other tribal entities. And so, for instance, formal consultation is a part of this law and a part of this process between the Indian Affairs Department formally and the Navajo Nation as we look to make recommendations for expenditure of these funds moving forward. And I think that a key point is that transparency and inclusion are critical in this effort to build broad-based support from the community up about how it is that we're moving from what was to what will be. The process, as so many other processes have fallen victim to over the past year to 18 months now, is a process that we had anticipated. We would bring people together. We would have a lot of time focused on forums and listening to communities and listening to affected persons and affected workers, and really listen to what was needed and what could be best invested in to create jobs for a new economy in the affected area. And unfortunately, because of COVID, we just really have not had the opportunity to be able to have that in-person set of meetings that we would have liked to have had. The legislation required 3 meetings total. We've now had 2 formal meetings, but we will likely have at least 2 more. So we're going to go above and beyond what the legislation required. But I think most importantly, living up to our charge to hear from the communities, get feedback about what could be invested in and what was best for the area. We as conveners and as a Energy Transition Act Commission decided to issue a RFI, a request for information, just broadly seeking information from anyone and everyone that was interested in providing us ideas on what could be invested in to promote the goals of the Energy Transition Act. And so again, retraining workers, how it is that we can invest in Indian land, and then also, of course, ensuring that we're promoting economic development for the future. So the RFI was an effort to restart the process of listening to affected communities and people and seeking information. As we all know, it's particularly in today's age, while meetings have been canceled, it's really difficult if folks don't have broadband capabilities, if they don't have access to computers, or even if they don't have the knowledge or the understanding of how to work with computers, because they're been taught in a traditional way. We understood that there would be some challenges in seeking out these RFIs, in which case what we're doing is we're keeping the process open. There's not a closure to the end date for when ideas can be submitted to us. And we're looking to be having in-person meetings again here in the state of New Mexico, probably in July or August, so that then additional opportunity for ideas to come forward will be made available for folks. In the RFI that were submitted, and they're all available on the Department of Workforce Solutions website, there were 28 of them that were turned in, and all of them had incredible merit and were wonderful ideas for our consideration. But I just wanted to point out some that are salient to the conversation that we're having today around energy and critical minerals. The first is that there was a combined proposal that came from San Juan College and INTEC, so the Navajo Transitional Energy Corporation, that would have, or that is proposing to establish a center of excellence for critical minerals, and very specifically speaking about helium. And I want to talk about helium just real specifically here for a moment, because there was just recently a Helium Symposium that was hosted by SITLA and the University of Utah. And it's very clear that helium is a terrific and tremendous opportunity for Northwest New Mexico, and specifically the Navajo. And helium, and I would defer to the experts from New Mexico Tech to provide the lesson about helium, because I'm certainly no expert, but what I've learned is helium is used in the development of fiber optics, of space and defense industries, the health industry, as well as the creation of microchips. And as was pointed out on the previous presentation, there is tremendous opportunity for helium development here in northwestern New Mexico. And I would just add that the benefit for helium is that we really have the opportunity to use existing roads, existing well pad locations, and we can use the current tools that we have in place that have been used for oil and natural gas development here in the San Juan Basin for many, many years. we can use those same tools and the same people. So helium is a true opportunity to put New Mexicans and folks from all over the Four Corners and folks from a number of different tribal lands back to work immediately. And so we were real excited to see this proposal come in to establish a helium center of excellence and tying into a critical mineral center of excellence. And of course, we also received a proposal from a company named Sona Ash, which I believe is working with New Mexico Tech and others to recover critical minerals from fly ash from the coal mine operation that's already been talked about today. We received a proposal to develop a hydroelectric energy storage center, which in essence is just a gigantic battery. And so it's putting water inside of a mountain. And then as there's a need for electricity, then you can generate hydroelectricity with the water that's been stored. And the proposal came in as an ultra long duration pumped hydro, so 70 hours of 1,500 megawatts of electricity being stored on Navajo Nation property. And then we also received, and while not on the topic of critical minerals, I think it's valuable to identify that northwestern New Mexico is clearly been focused on as a development opportunity for blue hydrogen projects. And so we received a presentation or a proposal from a company named Libertad that would be producing 100% hydrogen produced electricity to then be sold to power purchase agreements to folks in the Western United States. And then also a proposal from Big Navajo, which was to take fugitive methane emissions from Navajo Nation Oil and Gas Corporation and turn those into hydrogen for the purposes of fueling vehicles. So as you can see, we received a number of different, even just energy ideas through this process. And this is just 4 or 5 where we received 28 different proposals, including many relating to sustainable farming and farm-to-table business enterprise. So we're real excited about this RFI process that we went through in encouraging ideas to be presented to us. And I'll just reiterate that there's nobody that is closed out of this process at this point. We're looking for the securitization bonds to be sold likely in 2022 because the Energy Transition Act has been challenged by several non-governmental organizations in the New Mexico Supreme Court. And so those securitization bonds aren't able to be sold yet. And so funding hasn't come through to each of the departments. And as long as the funding has not come through, we're going to be entertaining people's ideas because obviously there's a great number of things that are changing really on a day-to-day basis as it relates to energy production. And really what it comes down to, and the message that I'd like to share is that when looking at energy, we're really going to have to, keep in mind a all of the above approach. And information from the Energy Information Association here in the United States is very clear that while renewable energy assets are on the rise, and they are projected to continue to be on the rise, and folks are going to want to purchase their power from renewable energy power sources, there is still an absolute need for natural gas, for hydrogen, for other petroleum, and even coal and nuclear as baseload for the renewable energy. And so the message that I want to spread is that while New Mexico is looking at opportunities inside of hydrogen and helium, perhaps there are other opportunities in other areas that folks are interested in or could develop. And right now is really the right time to be talking about, what is it that we can do to promote this energy development. And then I think a second question that needs to be answered, and it really is on a tribe by tribe basis, is do we want to be an energy consumer or do we want to be an energy exporter? And really identifying the answer to that question, because there are costs and benefits to each of the answers, but going into the conversation with that question answered, I think helps in driving the direction for what it is, for what you want for your people. So for us, next steps through the Energy Transition Act are to group together these submissions into similar interests. So perhaps putting together a group of solar installators or installers, excuse me, a group of energy producers, a group of next generation energy production, a group of farming, and bring that back to the broader Energy Transition Act Commission, and then seek that feedback that we had really started out wanting. Considering that the process has now been delayed by a year in the funding and COVID, while the progress has been slow, it's still an important body of work for us to be working on. And I'm excited about where we can go, particularly with some of the new announcements that are coming from the Department of Energy and Investment in economically disadvantaged communities, and potentially really realizing some additional resources that can be brought to bear in areas that have truly suffered and suffered for a very, very long time. And then as we bring that full committee back together, then we'll of course obtain feedback and public input, again with the idea of transparency and inclusion through the entire process. A recommendation that I have for those who are listening today in any sort of energy transition conversation, in any sort of energy development conversation, it is to ensure that you have the right people at the table to have the affected community's best interest at heart, rather than trying to live to a specific agenda or a preconceived notion or objective, right? So this law was passed, and we jumped in with a work plan to identify how we were going to push forward with energy transition and make it happen very quickly. And we have been thrown a great number of curveballs. And so it's important to remember that we just need to listen to one another. We need to work together and work from inside the community rather than the State House, no matter how difficult that is. So if it's from chapter house to chapter house here in New Mexico, we just need to be flexible. We need to be nimble, and ultimately, in any sort of energy transition conversation, we need to be remembering that we're dealing with people's livelihoods who might not agree or believe in you, but you need to believe in them. So those are my recommendations in looking at conversations around energy transition and energy development. It really is about civility. So finally, as a quote from New Mexico's governor talking about the Energy Transition Act, she said, "This is really a big deal. The Energy Transition Act fundamentally changes the dynamic in New Mexico. This legislation is a promise to future generations of New Mexicans who will benefit from both a cleaner environment and a more robust energy economy with exciting career and job opportunities." And of course, we're still looking toward those exciting career and job opportunities. Perhaps it's in rare earth, perhaps it's in helium, perhaps it's in hydrogen, who knows? But exciting opportunities to come. Crucially, the Energy Transition Act does not leave affected workers and neighbors behind. We look out for one another. With this law, we seal that promise. And so I thought that was a great quote from Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, to talk about what our goals and tasks are as it relates to the Energy Transition Act. All right, that is what I have by way of a presentation today. The pleasure has truly been mine, and Mr. Watchman and Mr. Gray, I stand for questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Sandell. Very, very informative and on cutting edge, if you will, in looking at working with all impacted communities, including tribes. And so I know that a lot of benefits are scheduled to come to New Mexico and the tribes, especially Navajo and those tribes that are utilizing fossil energy. So let's move over to some questions. And so I'll maybe turn over to Steve and Mike to see if we have any questions on both the rare earth and rare minerals subject, and then the New Mexico ETA. So Mike, let me turn over to you real quick to get your thoughts and see if you have any questions for our guest speakers.
Sure. Well, first off, Dr. McLemore learned quite a bit. I did not realize the extent of work that's been done in New Mexico on rare earth elements. It's quite an eye-opener. And Jason, thank you for the insights to that work going on with the Energy Transition Act for New Mexico. That was very insightful to understand how that works. For Jason, for you, when you look at these projects, if you talk about blue hydrogen, the assumption is it's going to be using fossil fuels to produce the hydrogen. That's why it's blue. So that would also have carbon capture and then geologic storage that would go with that, I assume?
That's correct. Yes, sir. Yeah, and the San Juan Basin specifically, and I know we're talking to a broader group, but the San Juan Basin specifically has some terrific geologic features to be able to not only store the carbon, but also have some opportunities to store the hydrogen as well, so that we're able to use it as a just-in-time type of fuel.
Great. You know, this came up in a conversation I was in the middle of not long ago, and it might be applicable here. There is a huge growing demand for more massive data processing, not server centers or co-location for centers, but just raw, brute data crunching from the Bitcoin blockchain management, 5G network expansions, the uptake of AI training at a commercial levels become a big piece of this. And this is kind of all just under the surface energy demand. And I'm not so sure that a place like the Four Corners, New Mexico area is a great location for these are going to be large scale facilities that need air conditioning. They need a lot of energy, and they need to be out of everybody else's way. And of course, the uptake of commercial virtual reality systems are big data crunchers as well. And we'll have the EV charging stations popping up all over that begin to change load patterns. And I don't know if that was something that in the Energy Transition Act for New Mexico that you were looking at, the data processing piece is one of the components. Or are you open for all, I suppose?
Yeah, look, we're northwestern New Mexico, at least where I'm at, and any job is a good job, right? But at the end of the day, we did have a good number of conversations around data processing and really specifically to the energy needs that were associated with it and the clean energy needs, not necessarily renewable, but just that the electricity itself is not been transmitted over long transmission lines and whatnot. And so we see it as a true opportunity that is growing in leaps and bounds really by the day as this hydrogen conversation continues.
Right.
Michael, I'd like to address that too.
Sure.
One of our components in the rare earth and coal project that the DOE has funded or is about to fund, we are working very closely with the national labs to be looking at artificial intelligence to take in a set of data that we do, drill data we already have, the sampling that we already have, and use artificial intelligence to actually predict what the resources would be elsewhere in the basin. And we are working very closely with the San Juan College, and we also hope to work with the Navajo Institute and to train these students to be using this kind of technology. Because as you said, you know, big data is becoming a catch-all, but it is something that is very critical. You need to use all of this data. And there's a lot of data that we've already collected that we will utilize, but there's also a lot more data to go out and collect and fill in the holes. But then the interpretation of it becomes really critical and can help save money, as well as get some students involved with interpreting this stuff.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we are looking at that very closely.
You, in a sense, you could be, I don't know what other states are doing for this similar kind of work, but I kind of have the impression that New Mexico is probably ahead of the curve on most other states in the kind of work that you're talking about you have been doing. You become maybe the model for other states, or your work can expand to other areas outside of New Mexico, what you've learned and what you've done and what you're developing there.
Yep, thank you. That certainly is our hope, that we are a leader in that. And a lot of our graduate students here from New Mexico Tech go on to not only industry, but other government agencies. So they're taking this knowledge that we're teaching them and taking it outside of the state, as well as using it inside the state too. So
Wow,
thank
exciting
you
stuff.
much.
Oh, you bet. That's great to hear. I happen to be in the middle of the conversation on the big data demands coming that are out there now being developed, and the iterations of that are going to continue to expand. And it has shift on the energy budget as well. But the AI, one that amazed me was how deep the AI work has spread throughout. I'd say throughout industry, but it sounds like in research as well. And also the training of the AI. It just doesn't come in a box ready to go. You gotta take it to school. Anyway.
Yes, there's a lot of training involved.
That's what I understand. You know what? Steve and Derek, you guys know that I'm capable of keeping a conversation going longer than we need. So what I'd like to do is, defer to either you or Sheila. You popped in for a second there. Maybe there was something you wanted to add to the equation, and then I'd let Steve and Derek take the run.
Steve and Derek should take the run, but I agree with your ability to carry a conversation for across many miles without taking a breath.
I think this question will be good for Dr. McLemore. How, in your view, will you be able to engage the tribes so that they're not left behind in this opportunity around rare earth? And how will you communicate that, help them understand the importance that is, right now of what the country's looking at?
So when I did that the project on the Jicarilla Reservation, I worked very closely with the tribal council. I had them come out during the sampling and drilling project and tried to explain to them and answer their questions as to what I was doing and the procedure I was using and how this was going to help them in the future. I think it's very important that the tribes understand what their mineral resources are. I'm a geologist. It takes the engineers and the other folks to make something of what we find in geology, but I start with the ground. And I think that the tribes have a lot of resources available to them, but they don't understand those resources. They don't understand what they can be used for. And that is what I can help bring to the table. And I think at the end of the day, I think I was able to convey this to the Jicarilla Tribal Council. And I think that they had a very good appreciation of the resource they had. I think they were even disappointed that there was not enough there to really go after right now, but they understood that that resource is also for the future, and perhaps in the future it could be utilized. So that's where I come. In addition, like Dr. Mojavai said, is that, I was very lucky. I had a Navajo geology student in my class this spring, and I was very cognizant of how well she did, even though she was an undergraduate taking a graduate level course. And she's in field camp right now. And so when this project came up, I offered her the opportunity to come on with me as a master student. And with her, I'm hoping, because her parents are on the reservation, she lives on the reservation. And so I'm hoping that between us, she can help us understand more on how to interact with the tribe, how to interact with the chapter houses. I have done a little bit of this in my earlier days working with uranium, but this project won't be quite as contentious as uranium. So, and I'm hoping that too, that maybe with her being successful, that we will be able to engage other students and bring them down to Mexico Tech and get them trained. And so that they also can not only work with the tribe, but also work with the industry and try to get us all on an even keel and understanding. So those are the kinds of things I'm bringing to the table. And others, you know, the engineers will take off and they will actually find ways to extract the minerals from the resources we're identifying. So I hope that answered your question.
It does. Excellent. And I think that's really important, you know, because one of the things that we want the tribes to do in all of this is capture the opportunities that are there. We don't want them to be left behind, you know, in some of these great opportunities. Jason, this question is for you. You talked about these economic depressed zones. How many, I know we're just referring to one state, but how many of these zones are on tribal lands?
You know, Mr. Gray, I think that's a developing conversation as the federal infrastructure bill is being looked at. And so I don't have a good knowledgeable answer for you on that, but from what I understand, that there's a conversation about 15 different economic zones being, economically depressed zones being identified across the United States once there's a final deal on the infrastructure package, and looking at how investments can be put into that infrastructure package to assist those communities to address exactly the things that we're talking about today. So I don't know that there's a good solid answer for you, but I do know that particularly across the Rocky Mountains, there's been a good number of communities that have been impacted severely over the past decade or two since the global economic crisis.
Okay. Well,
Steve, I do want to jump back real quick and I'd like to offer a thought as it relates to the previous question that you had for Virginia. And I was struck, you had a previous presentation where there was a member of the Crow tribe, I believe his name was CJ, who participated on the panel. And he was very clear that two things need to be kept in mind that really were impressed upon me. First, not all tribes are the same, and they shouldn't all have to speak with a single voice. I thought that was very impressive. And then secondarily, that each tribe and each nation has their own development plan, has the right for their own development plan, and should have a seat at the table in discussing what that development plan is. So I just wanted to offer those thoughts because I think that CJ really hit the nail on the head.
Okay. Well, thank you.
I certainly agree with that. In my working with the different tribes throughout the state, they are different. They have different cultures. They bring different perspectives to the table, and they have different desires. And I think that it is very important to keep that in mind.
Yes, and I agree. And just in conclusion on that second question, I think it's really important. The economic depressed zones, they bring an opportunity to tribal lands, especially from when there's infusion of federal and sometimes state dollars into those areas, what could make it very attractive to the tribal communities. Again, this is the type of things that we're looking at and we want to keep our pulse on because we want the opportunities such as those for the tribes so that they can capture them and move forward with these opportunities. So again, thank you all. Those were the two questions that came up. Thank you.
And Steve, I'll just comment on that last statement that you made because it's really spot on. I mean, think about the idea generation process that we've been through with the Energy Transition Act Commission in generating these 20 ideas or 28 ideas with $20 million available. Now, unfortunately, we haven't been able to spend a penny, and it's gone on too long. But just the bringing of people together and the generation of ideas that will be directly invested into an impacted area in a statutorily defined affected area, I think is just exactly the conversation that we need to have. And you made the point terrifically. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve. Great questions. From my perspective, I think I heard a couple of things from the tribal level. I think you mentioned this, Jason. You know, there's two components that many tribes are looking at. One is, how do you provide power and energy locally? You know, we still have a lot of reservations, including Navajo, that don't have access to electricity, don't have access to water. So there's definitely a big need. There's also many tribes strategically that either have resources or land that could look at exporting their energy production. And so I think in many cases, it's really up to the tribe. And so last year we had a gentleman from BIA mention that if you look at revenues generated by tribes, gaming is number one, but energy is number two, you know, in terms of revenue generation. And so I know many tribes are looking at, how do you diversify, especially with changing markets, how do you diversify your revenue base so that you can provide jobs and provide the services. And so I think that the big challenge for many tribes is obviously coming together and talking about their needs, their local needs. And as CJ pointed out in our last session, in many cases, we got this national agenda going on, but, you know, is there enough talk? Is there enough conversation from each tribe? You know, every tribe is different. And so how do you bring to bear, you know, we have roughly 570, I think the count is 576 different tribes here in the United States. So how do we bring from them all the ideas so that our tribes can work on energy development, either locally or as a product that's exported, so that it provides for, you know, for their well-being. So those are the big topics. And so Steve and I'll use your term, I think Steve and I are trying to be conveners, you know, with the different parties. You know, you got the Department of Energy, you got the Department of Interior, you got private companies, and they all look at tribes as potentially as an opportunity. And on the tribal side, I think someone asked me today, are tribes really in a position of willing to do this? And I think many tribes are. Many tribes want to transition and be a part of, you know, the new clean economy, carbon reduction program. It's just in many cases, maybe limited resources, limited talent, or, you know, just basically trying to convene at the tribal level all the people. You know, on Navajo, we got chapters. I know that with some of the smaller tribes, in order for a decision to be made, all the people have to come together in what's called a general council meeting. And so, but at those meetings, clear, concise information as to the benefits, I think, are very, very important. And so I know, you know, I'm just basically providing my comments. I think on the rare earth and rare minerals side, understanding, I think you mentioned this, Jenny, you know, what do tribes have? I think it's very, very important. What is at their disposal? And I think there's many studies out there, like in New Mexico, we have an idea of the potential for resource development. Looking at the Rocky Mountain tribes, I haven't seen a lot of data. And, you know, I go back to the old days of the Council of Energy Resource Tribes, a group that was funded for about 30 years. I think it was funded in part by the Department of Energy, and I think through the administration of Native Americans. CERT, as it was called, put together a very comprehensive database, if you will, on resources and the potential resources out there. And so maybe we need to go back to something like that, so that there's a repository, so that right now, you know, we talked about there's a big national security need. You know, we're now relying on other countries for, you know, for our basic necessities, batteries and solar facilities. And so, you know, how do we bring to bear all these resources? So I know that tribes are talking about convening through maybe some national organization. So our forum basically is to provide as much information as possible for all segments that really want to deal with tribes. So I want to end there by saying thank you very, very much. I think we're at the end of our time. Again, I want to thank the Department of Energy, their Office of Fossil Energy, USEA, and of course, I want to thank Jerry and Jenny and Navid for great presentations. We have 3 more to go, and so we're going to be exploring things that I think come to bear are access to capital, and so we're going to look at that in our next series. Another big challenge is just permitting. You know, how do you, because tribal lands are considered federal lands, so unlike, you know, what you see in many parts of the country where you own the land, you basically develop. Indian country takes a lot more hurdles and obstacles to get through. And so in many cases, some folks say, God, it's, you know, maybe it's a no start because of the, you know, I've heard that it takes probably 4 times as long to develop in Indian country versus off Indian country. You know, is that a myth, or can you get around that? And so, but I want to say thank you for joining us today. And I want to thank all the listeners for joining us and chiming in. We have 3 more to go, 3 more webinars. And so I don't know, Steve, if you have any concluding remarks here before we sign off, but I'll turn it over to you real quickly, Steve, and maybe a conclusion here.
Yeah, no, I don't have any more comments regarding our discussion today, but I do again, I do thank everyone, all of our panelists for joining us today, you know, for sharing their wealth of knowledge, because this is really important, I think, as we move forward, as we try to get the information out there to Indian country. There's a lot of opportunity, as we mentioned before, and you can see, and people are starting to think about these things right now. And we want to make sure that we get that information out there. So we look forward to these different topics. We think they're really good. And as we go through this, as this transition occurs, you know, we really just want to make sure that the tribes are right at the table and taking advantages of some of these opportunities. So again, with that, we thank everyone for joining us, and we look forward to future discussions around this. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And as Michelle mentioned earlier, these sessions are being recorded and it's available at the USEA website. And I think Michael has maybe a few words before we close here.
I was just going to say thank you all for the great work and taking the time to do this. It's incredibly informative. And as you were saying, this is archived on our website. So you can send people to the link, and the materials that have been turned over to be made available to the public will be there. I will say that we do get a lot of traffic on the past events where people hadn't been able to participate, so they can actually sit down and review this at a different hour of the day for them. We do see quite a bit of traffic that way. Again, thank you, everybody. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to turn it over to Michelle and let her do the wrap-up part. And great kudos. I learned a lot on this, and that's always cool to learn. Michelle?
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for being here. Looking forward to the next presentation. And I think everyone else has covered everything. Thank you all for being here.
Great, thank you, and be well, everybody. Be safe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
So long.
Yeah, thank you.